The Bank of Namibia has retained its benchmark interest rate at 6.5%, citing the recent move by the South African Central Bank to peg its inflation rate at 3% and the move to stimulate economic growth even as inflation eases. The Namibian dollar is anchored on the South Africa's rand, which has appreciated steadily in recent weeks. Now let's take excerpts from the post-MPC meeting briefing held earlier today.
The task of a central bank governor is simple to state, but hard to live. To steady the ship when the seas are calm, and especially when they are not. It has been my honor of my life to do so with you. Today I deliver my final policy rate decision, not as an ending, but as a handover of responsibility we have carried together. That responsibility is to safeguard stability for generations that follow, or will follow. On the 1st and 2nd of December, the Monetary Policy Committee of the Bank of Namibia held its bi-monthly meeting of 2025 to decide on the appropriate monetary policy stance for the next 2 months, guided by incoming data and the assessment thereof. To continue safeguarding the peg between the Namibia dollar and the South African rand while supporting the domestic economy, the MPC decided to keep the repo rate unchanged at 6.5%. Let's consider recent economic developments in our country. The domestic economy grew moderately. Inflation has remained well contained, while growth in the private sector slowed since the previous MPC meeting. The merchandise trade deficit narrowed while the stock of international reserves remains sufficient to maintain the currency peg and meet the country's international financial obligations. High-frequency indicators in the domestic economy suggest that while economic activity maintained positive growth, the pace of expansion slowed during the first 10 months of 2025 compared to the same period in 2024. The slowdown was primarily driven by contractions in the manufacturing sector, diamond mining, livestock farming, and transport subsectors. Given the generally subdued economic activity so far in 2025, real gross domestic product growth is now projected to slow from 3.7% in 2024 to 3% in 2025. That's 0.5 percentage point lower than the previous forecast. Looking ahead, real GDP growth, however, is projected to recover to 3.8% in 2026 and further to 4.3% in 2027. This recovery is expected to be primarily underpinned by a rebound in the agriculture sector, a sustained upturn in construction, robust electricity generation, and stronger output from the uranium subsector. Downside risks to the outlook remain and include the possibility of renewed drought conditions, infrastructure constraints, and sluggish global demand. Annual inflation remained contained and averaged 3.6% during the first 10 months of 2025, compared to 4.5% during the same period in 2024. The disinflation was primarily reflected in the categories of housing, transport, and alcoholic beverages. Nevertheless, compared to the previous month, inflation rose marginally to 3.6% in October 2025 from 3.5% in September 2025. The inflation projection for 2025 remains stable at 3.6%, while that for 2026 has been revised downwards by 0.2 percentage point to 3.8% compared to the previous forecast. The 2026 revision reflects a stronger exchange rate assumption and a favorable oil price outlook. Risk to the forecast remain exchange rate volatility and potential increases in administered and oil prices. The annual growth in private sector credit extension, PSCE, slowed to 4.7% in October 2025 from 5.8% recorded in August 2025.